Choosing travel insurance is such a joyless admin task, but I've taken out a few different travel policies in the past few years, and I've recently returned from 6 months around the world where I ended up having to make a few claims. Everything from medical issues, losing items, as well as some flight cancellations. So I'm going to break down the questions you can ask yourself when you're researching, pricing up, and choosing your travel insurance. And I'll make a separate video about the claims process once that's all done and dusted. I'd also love to hear in the comments what you look for in travel insurance. One of the questions you might have is, do I need travel insurance? The answer is, if you're staying overnight in paid accommodation, then yes, you do. I would always recommend travel insurance. Question 2 is, what's going to impact the price of my travel insurance? A few things. Ones that come to mind are your age, where you're going to be going, how long you're going to be for, and if you have any pre-existing medical conditions. Question 3 is, how can I research pricing more easily? So yes, there's several places you can start. I would start with online comparison sites for your own country. Also, if you have a relationship with other insurers, that's a good place. Just go get a quote directly and compare those. I would also consider asking friends and family for recommendations, especially if they have similar travel plans as you or they're a similar age. I know there's specific travel insurance for people aged like, say, 50 and up. The next question to ask yourself is if there's any potential discounts that you're entitled to. Some things that come to mind are if you belong to an auto club, or if you can buy the travel insurance bundled as part of a travel package. Alternatively, some people get travel insurance through work, or they can get a discount through their credit card. I'm also aware of shopping portals. So for me, I sometimes use the British Airways shopping portal, and I can get discounts up to, say, 10%. The next question is, when should the travel policy start? You might be tempted to have it start the day before you leave, but if you want cancellation insurance or cancellation coverage, then you're going to want to have that start date be the day you book your travel. Let's say you booked a flight today and it was canceled tomorrow, but your travel insurance doesn't start till next week, then you're not covered. So that's something to bear in mind. The next question is to ask yourself, what type of travel policy do you want? The 3 types that I'm familiar with are the single trip, where one policy covers a single trip, and that's great if you're not traveling very often. Well, if you're just traveling maybe once a year. Otherwise, look at the annual multi-trip, where you get to travel as many times within that 1 year, adhering to whatever fine print is agreed. And then the third kind is the backpacker style, which is when you're away for months at a time. The backpacker one's really only appropriate if you're planning to be away for an extended period of time. I ran into limitations on how frequently I could return to my home country, which is the UK. For any of these, you're going to ask yourself, what countries or regions do I plan to travel to, or do I maybe want to travel to? Because the pricing will be impacted by where you go in the world. The travel insurance that I buy has higher prices if you intend to travel to USA, Mexico, and the Caribbean, presumably because that's where the healthcare costs are the highest. And then there's a mid-tier, which is anywhere in the world apart from those 3 places. And then the cheapest tier for me is Europe only, and it has a specific list of countries that they consider Europe. The next question is, how long is your trip going to be? So if you do the backpacker one, that's going to be very important because every day is going to cost you more for the insurance. I know for the annual multi-trip, my pricing was based on whether the stay was 32 days, 45 days, or 62 days. I also know that I have the option to upgrade if I decide to change my mind at any point, and they can't guarantee what the price will be, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. The next big thing to think about is what policy features you want. Like, what do you want covered? It's going to probably vary depending on who your insurance suppliers are. The main ones to think about are trip cancellation coverage. I don't just mean if a flight is canceled. I mean if you have to cancel your whole trip for some awful reason, then that would cover that. The next one is what level of medical emergency coverage you need and any emergency repatriation. Badly broke your leg, you couldn't continue your trip, or worse, they need to fly you back. Usually this doesn't include any kind of routine medical stuff, so it would just be emergency. So in my situation, I was in the Philippines and I was in El Nido. So when I arrived in Manila in the morning, I felt pretty tired. I just put it down to just general fatigue. But by that evening, I was in a bad state when it comes to keeping fluids in my body. The whole next day, I couldn't leave my room, and I ended up phoning reception and asking if they had an anti-diarrhea tablet because I had one with me, but it hadn't made any effect. They sent a nurse, and then a couple hours later, they said, look, you might want to consider going to the hospital. We're happy to drive you there. So I went to the hospital because I knew I had a flight the next day to Hong Kong, and I didn't, even though it was only like a 2.5 hour flight, I didn't want to contemplate being in the same situation I was in when it came to retaining liquids. I was diagnosed with gastroenteritis and dehydration, so they rehydrated me through an IV, and I was prescribed 6 different medications to help get me back on my feet. The next one is gadget cover, specifically high value things like mobile phones, laptops, tablets, and also deciding like what value you want covered and any limitations on what they'll cover. The next one is travel disruption. A good example is if you were traveling to the airport and there was train accident and your train couldn't get through. The next question is if you want any additional coverage added. So in my example, I added cruise cover because, again, any medical treatment on a cruise ship is a lot more expensive. They often will charge extra for things like winter sports cover. The next question to ask is, have I thoroughly read and understand the terms and conditions and all the policy fine print? And to help you, my tip for this is you can copy and paste the terms and conditions into something like ChatGPT or Gemini and ask it to break it down for you in plain English. I'm not saying it's going to be totally accurate, but it should give you a really good idea. I often find some of the policy wording just a little bit too confusing. The next thing to ask yourself is if you understand what's excluded, because sometimes there will be limitations. Another question is which medical conditions you need to declare. And honestly, this is when speaking to someone on the phone was really helpful, because as much effort as they put into their website, it's just not the same, because I had some specific things I wanted to ask them. In my situation, things that I thought might be declarable were actually not, because I'm not being actively treated or I'm not receiving medication for them. I would always declare something, even if you're not sure you need to, and then they can tell you whether it's declarable or not. But what you don't want to do is hide something and then find out later that your coverage is being canceled because you were dishonest. The next question is to ask yourself if you're happy for it to auto-renew at the end of the term, because I think a lot of the insurers like it when you agree to have it keep running. However, of course, the price is going to probably go up. And also, if there's any changes in your situation that might alter the coverage, that's something to just think about as well. So in my instance, I almost always say no, because I'll just want to maybe comparison shop again at that point. The next section is just about being prepared. So let's say you've already got your insurance. So question is, where are you going to keep your policy details handy so that you can access them? If you use a password manager, it's actually not a bad idea to keep that policy information in the same database, because then you can just access it. I don't travel with printed insurance documents. And when I went to the hospital, they didn't actually ask to see them. They asked if I had insurance, but that was it. You might want someone at home to have a copy of your travel insurance just in case they need to act on your behalf, especially if maybe it's your emergency contact. That's the next question. Who is your emergency contact? The next one is storing the contact information for your insurance provider. Again, I didn't contact my insurance provider when I lost these things or when I went to the medical center, but I suppose in and amongst the fine print, there might have been something about contacting them right away. So I think having those phone numbers really handy is a good idea. So however, wherever you store phone numbers, that makes the most sense. I might just put mine in my password manager again, as opposed to storing them as a contact on my phone. The next question to ask yourself is, what kind of documentation will you need to submit a claim? And the only reason I ask this is because I had flights got canceled and I ended up taking a ferry instead. The woman who ran the guest house actually booked the ferry for me, and she sent me a WhatsApp photo of the actual ticket. So I did have a receipt. In almost all instances, they're going to want to have proof of all of your flights, outbound, inbound, and anything that supports the claim. In most cases, everything's going to be documented in your email, so that's really helpful. Another question to ask yourself is, what is the process for submitting a claim? So for my insurer, the claim process can be done online. In fact, they want you to do it online. However, what I found out is that once I submitted, I couldn't actually see the breakdown. Like it was just more of a, here's an overview. Another question, if you want to be ultra prepared, is ask yourself what steps you need to take to report something if it's lost or stolen. In my case, they wanted to see a police report. Well, at the time, I didn't file a police report, but thankfully I did file a lost and found report at the airport where I lost my things. Let's just say there's going to probably be an importance to reporting things to the relevant authorities. The last one, if you want to be really, really, really prepared, is find out what you should do if you're not satisfied with the outcome of the claim. YouTube recommends you watch this one next, so I'll see you there.